let us know about AI's role in regarding the recent violations of human rights in Laos. I hope the volume is loud.
Kumar, hello, can you hear us? Okay, if you can just, we're just gonna turn up the volume for you, and then, so we have you here at the law school here at UDC with around 15 people, as well as your good friend Micheal Beer from Nonviolence International. Yep. And so if you could just talk briefly about maybe Amnesty in Laos, that would be great for a brief time because we know you're very busy.
Yes. Thank you very much. Amnesty International appreciates the fact that you are holding this event today. Amnesty International has been working on Laos for the last 20 to 40 years. But the biggest problem we face in Laos is the fact that we don't have access to Laos. They never allow us to visit their country. So we have been monitoring from outside and get information from inside and other sources and do advocacy and campaigning to promote human rights in Laos. Over the years, we have seen abuses against Hmong population and also against students and democracy activists, as well as media freedom and other freedom issues. But lately, we were little concerned that the disappearance has taken place in that country. In Southeast Asia, the disappearances have stopped over the last couple of years. And in Laos, we did not document disappearances for a long time, except during the months we documented some. So last December, an NGO leader, a civil society leader, called Bounthone suddenly disappeared. And we found out through several sources that he was stopped at a police checkpoint and he was seen taken in the police van. And the government denies that they were involved. The government claimed that they will be conducting impartial investigation. But to our knowledge, the investigation is not transparent and also it's not effective. Now almost 5 months have passed. There is no word about this gentleman who have disappeared. This is of serious concern to us because it sends a wrong message to the civil society, people in Laos, and to the region at large. For example, ASEAN human rights mechanism has human rights component, and they are trying to promote more values and more protection to protect human rights in ASEAN. So when that situation is taking place, what we are seeing today is the disappearance of a political or civil society activist that's taking place in the country of Laos, and no answer has been found so far. So that's our concern. That's why this conference that you are organizing today is of vital importance to us. First of all, we have to keep the pressure up on the Laotian government to ensure that Sambat Samban has been released, his whereabouts known, and no future abductions take place in that country. And we hope that this gathering and this discussion will help form the debate in the right direction, and some solution will come to this disappearance case in Laos. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kumar, very much.
Okay.
All right. Would you be possible to take a question or two?
Yeah.
Okay. So if anyone has a question, then we can direct it.
Yes.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I'd
No,
like
go ahead.
to start with a question. My name is Sen Valay. Welcome, Mr. Kumar. Thank you very much for taking time out of your, I'm sure, very busy schedule with all the human rights situations going on in the world. Yes, there seems to be an echo. We're trying to fix that. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to make it very brief, but I think our biggest concern is, is the case of Sombat Somphone. We still haven't heard from him about him, and we have, neither himself or his vehicle has been seen since that day, December 15th. We're very concerned, and we're glad that that you, along with the rest of the international community, are concerned about his case. First of all, I'd like to say that he's not the only case, although he's the highest profile so far, which has kind of aroused the attention of the world, which is it's about time. But we have other cases recently too. Policemen who complained about land grab situation, about foreign influences, have also disappeared in a couple of years ago. And then other cases also. These for us Laotians, we know that this sort of thing, what we call enforced disappearance, just like what the UN said, it's happening every day. It's nothing new, and at this point, I know that you know about the problems probably better than we do. You have more access to it, but we'd like to know what AI in particular is doing, not just in the case of Sombat, but about the setback to the civil society, which we were very hopeful about until his disappearance. Whether you're coordinating from outside in the neighboring countries like ASEAN, in the ASEAN region, particularly Thailand, is there any coordinated effort, collective effort to put, more weight on the pressure that our part, we'd like to know also what else we can do other than protesting and holding meetings to form solidarity with other groups. We are in touch with the Thai youth organizations and other NGOs. So that's just my main question. I'd like to find out what is your specific plan at this point for Mr. Sombat and other cases. Thank you.
No, we have been campaigning for this case ever since he disappeared. It's a priority for us because the nature of the disappearance that took place in the country. As far as the U.S. policy is concerned, even Secretary Clinton made a statement before she left the State Department. So it's one of the top priorities for the U.S. government. So what everyone can do now is to keep the momentum going by, at least in the U.S., meeting with your members of Congress and senators and urge them to appeal directly to the Laotian president or prime minister as well as the ambassador here for an answer. So I will say that's what you can do here. The second one is basically around the world. Your members should be able to reach out to the governments concerned to raise this issue as soon as possible, because time has passed almost 5 months now.
Yes. Yes. Would you be able to take more questions? Yes. I think
Just one more.
Yes, all right. Any questions from around the table? Oh, okay. Ms. Bounthone Chanthalavong, she's here, based here in Washington, D.C., has a question for you, Mr. Kumar.
Hi, Mr. Kumar. Welcome. This is Bounthone, resident of Virginia
Can you speak
here.
a little louder, please?
Louder?
Yeah, come by, closer, come closer.
You need to speak a little louder.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Now I'm closer. I hope you can hear me fine.
Sure.
I think your assessment of Laos movement on the human rights issue is very accurate. We, all the community, have been working toward getting the reform to Laos, but for a long time. We never, our situation never was heard or visible to outside world. And lately only that the case of Dr. Somphone has surfaced, and then we are very happy in one way that the community, the international community get involved very strongly and actively. And I think I would like to echo Dr. Sin to see, because I haven't heard you, part of what you answered. What is your opinion? What is your what is the hope or the fate of Dr. Somphone, Dr. Kumar?
I mean, we don't know the fate. One thing we know is that he was picked up by the police, and they are denying he is in their custody. We are keeping the pressure up to ensure that he is safe and released. So we don't know. No one knew his plight. As I mentioned earlier, even State Department Secretary Clinton made a high-profile appeal about the whereabouts of this gentleman. So it's happening. For whatever reason, we are unable to get the results. But we have to keep on doing. I mean, that's what I can only say. We have to keep on pushing and pressurizing. So I would recommend go to other countries as well, not only the US, because US have taken it as a high priority case, to urge them also get involved.
Thank you. And then would Amnesty International is doing that so actively as well, Dr. Kumar?
Yeah, we issued something called urgent action as soon as he disappeared. That's a high profile action where tens of thousands of members take part, reaching out to their governments and others to exert pressure. And we will continue to do it.
Thank you so much. It's our hope with your involvement, with your help. We think that we can go ahead, because various group of Laos people are doing that. We keep fighting, Dr. Kumar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, Kumar, thank you so much
Very much.
for your time. I know how precious it is. And we will keep organizing, and everyone, maybe we can also forward you, if possible, some more of the cases that you could then send to London to also look at for other examples of disappearances that was brought up by the first question.
They have to transfer what happened. So
Right.
thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Aloha, Kumar. Thank you so much. See you at the metro stop, hopefully one day. All right. Aloha. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar.
Yep.
All right, I think now we can start the our session here. I'd like to say again that we appreciate Amnesty International through Mr. G. Kumar for taking time out to share the concern with us here. And before we start, just some background briefing on who we are, what we're here for today. I'm Dr. Bounthone, President of the Alliance for Democracy in Laos, which is a people's movement. None of us here is on salary, and we do it from, from our heart. We do it from our head. We do it from our own pocket. And a lot of us here are have left our business for a few days, our jobs. I'm glad to say that I'm not in those two categories. I'm retired now, but again, we all put our hearts into this, and I see around the table here that we're coming from all over the world: Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Germany, France. Hope I haven't left anybody else. Oh yes, the U.S. and we have here as our special guests Professor Cooper. He's more than a guest; he's a friend. He's a patriot, I'd like to call for Laos, if I may say that. And Mr. Micheal Beer, I'd like to share his name with him. Mr. Beer, B-E-E-R, good name. And thank you very much for being here with us. It's certainly a privilege and a stroke of luck for us. Anyway, Dr. Bounthone will open the floor and just to give our guests a briefing on the ADL.
Basically, I'm here representing the ADL, and I want to express myself gratitude for everyone's sacrifice time being here, and we want to discuss briefly about the situation in Laos, political and otherwise.
ข้าพเจ้าขอกล่าวปัญหาของเราโดยเฉพาะเป็นปัญหาการเมืองของเรานับตั้งแต่ปี 1975 เป็นต้นมา
I'd like to discuss the situation in Laos politically since the fall of the government in 1975.
ปัญหาของเราเป็นการละเมิดสัญญา 1973 ที่ว่าตกลงกันแล้วทางฝ่ายคอมมิวนิสต์ได้ผิดพินสัญญาสันติภาพ 1973 นี้จึงเป็นเหตุให้ประเทศลาวนับแต่ปี 1975 เป็นต้นมาซึ่งว่าคอมมิวนิสต์ได้ปกครองจนถึงปัจจุบัน
The political situation, the problem started in Laos started with the 1973 Vientiane Accord, in which the various factions came into the court to reconcile politically to form a government of national unity, in which both factions came in. The royal government faction came in with good faith, whereas the Communist Party came in with bad faith, and they signed on all the greens. However, they never implemented, and then they subserved the national government of unity and basically abolished the monarchy in 1975 to form a communist state in 1975.
คนลาวหลายกว่าครึ่งล้านจำเป็นต้องได้อพยพหลบภัยมาอยู่ในประเทศเป็นโดยเฉพาะอยู่ในสหรัฐมีหลายกว่า300,000ในประเทศฝรั่งหลายกว่า200,000สรุปแล้วในทั่วโลกอย่างใหญ่กันอยู่เยอรมันอยู่ออสเตรเลียแคนาดาและประเทศอื่นๆในทั่วโลก
As a consequence of the communist takeover of Laos in 1975, over 500,000 Laotians, which may not sound much to the surrounding countries, but with a country at that time of 3 million people, losing 500,000 folks immigrating to 300,000 in the United States, 200,000 in France, and various numbers scattered throughout the world. That's a big size of population.
ปัญหาของเราที่ถือจับสูญก็คือทางคอมมูนิตี้ได้จับกลุ่มเอาข้าราชการทหารตำรวจของระบบพระราชอาณาจักรลาวจำนวนหลายกว่า 80,000 คนเข้าไปทรมานคุกศูนย์สัมมนาในนั้นมีทั้งพระเจ้ามหาชีวิตลาวและครอบครัวและหลายพันคนได้ถูกทรมานจนเสียชีวิต
The Laos Communist Party state abducted and imprisoned over 80,000 former royal Lao government officials, starting with the king, queen, crown prince, and high-ranking government officials from the police, army, and civil servants. Over 80,000 were imprisoned in the so-called Kumar camps and died. Many of them died.
แต่ปี 1975 มาฝ่ายคอมมิวนิสต์ได้เอาทุงได้มาเปลี่ยนทุงกาซ่า3หัวในสมัยเก่าไม่ทุงกาซ่า3หัวปัจจุบันแม่นพวกเขาใช้ทุง6 เดือน
They systematically erased vestiges of the prior regime, replaced the national flag, which was a three-headed elephant, which has been used since ancient time, replaced with the current flag, circle, and
ย้อนจากนั้นพวกเขาฝ่ายเคลื่อนไหวเพื่อประชาธิปไตยอิสระภาพพวกยังถือเอาทุงกาซ่า2 หัวเป็นเครื่องหมายของเขาพวกท่านจะเห็นหลายท่านที่ยังรักษาพวกเขาที่ว่าปฏิอยู่ที่นี่
That's why we still use the former flag as a symbol of our freedom, struggle for freedom.
เหตุการณ์ที่ให้เหตุที่สุดก็คือการปกครองภายใต้ระบบคอมมิวนิสต์ประเทศลาวได้ตกอยู่ภายใต้การปกครองของเวียดนามโดยเฉพาะแม่นพวกเขาได้มีการเซ็นสัญญาพิเศษลาวเวียดนามในวันที่ 18 เดือน 7,977 โดยแม่นฟาร์มบันดงและไกด์สอนพรหมวิหารอีกตามสัญญาตัวนี้อายุ25 ปีและต่อที่สุดปีใดจึงให้ประเทศลาวขึ้นกับเวียดนามพร้อมกัน
As a consequence of the Laos Communist Party's close relationship with the Vietnamese Communist Party, the Laos state has pretty much been the new colony of Vietnam, starting with the signing in July 18, 1977 of the special Vietnamese-Lao special treaty for 25 years and renewable every 10 years in perpetuity.
ภายใต้ระบอบปกครองนั้นนี้พวกเขาได้จับกุมคุ้มขังประชาชนลาวผู้ที่ห้องเอาความเป็นธรรมในนั้นนับตั้งแต่ผู้ที่สังกัดอยู่ในขั้นน้ำสูงสุดอยู่ในของพรรครัฐเป็นต้นแม่นอยู่ในสภาแห่งชาติมีท่านทองสุขสายสังคีท่านแสงสักกิตพงษ์และท่านรัศมีคำผุยที่ว่าได้เสนอถึงความผิดพลาดของการปกครองแบบเผด็จการในลาวเสนออยากให้มีการเปลี่ยนแปลงไปสู่ประชาธิปไตยที่มีหลายภาคการเมืองพวกคนเสนออยู่ในสภาเท่านั้นก็ยังถูกจับไปขังคุกทรมานถึง 14 ปี
The Communist Party of Laos does not tolerate any dissent, so anyone, even within their own ranks, that suggest for positive reform have been in prison. Most notably, the three fellows, Ramsey, Tong Suk, and Fang, they've been since abducted and never seen from again.
ในปี 1998 แล้วท่านทองสุขสายสังคีได้เสียชีวิตด้วยการถูกทรมานอยู่ในคุกแห่งนั้น
In 1998, prominent, what was at that time, he was still within their ranks. He was abducted and have since disappeared since 1998. Tong Suk, he was a prominent minister within their regime. However, they don't trust anyone and they have since eradicated him.
หมายความว่าพวกท่านทั้ง3ถูกจับ 1990 แล้วท่านทองสุขถูกทรมาน8 ปีเสียชีวิตในคุกและ 14 ปีต่อมาพวกเขาได้ปล่อย2ท่านที่ยังเหลือนั้นแต่ว่าพวกเพิ่นถูกปล่อยออกมาก็ถูกข่มขู่ทุกอย่างเท่าถึงปัจจุบันนี้เขายังข่มขู่ท่านรัศมีคำผุยอยู่ทุกมือว่าท่านเจ้ายังเหน่งจริงอย่างจะถูกทรมานหลายทบให้แห่งกว่าเก่า
After over a decade of imprisonment, they released Ramsey, Ransami Kampui, and Fang. However, they're pretty much under house arrest and with strict monitoring from the government.
ส่วนท่านแสงสักกิตพงษ์ได้เสียชีวิตไปแล้วแสงสักกิตพงษ์
Sang Sakjitapong has since died in prison.
เสียชีวิตภายหลังที่ถูกปล่อยการเคลื่อนไหวของคนลาวโบได้หยุดเสาที่มาอยู่นอกประเทศอยู่ในประเทศโดยเฉพาะพวกอยู่ขบวนนักศึกษาลบตะวันออก 1990 ก็ได้เดินขบวนประท้วงต่อระบบปกครองเผด็จการประท้วงต่อการขึ้นกับเวียดนามแต่พวกกระเจ้าก็ถือปราบปรามถือข่มขู่และในที่สุดก็ต้องได้แต่งมาอยู่ประเทศตะวันตก
There were brief attempts by the students to peacefully ask for a transition to a free and fair elections. However, once again, they were systematically eradicated and imprisoned. Some of them have since were fortunate to escape and reside overseas under political asylum.
อันนั้นในเหตุการณ์1990ในโอกาสที่โลกตะวันออกกำลังมีการเปลี่ยนแปลงไปสู่ประชาธิปไตย
This was in conjunction with the Eastern European inspired revolution.
9 ปีต่อมาคือ1999ขบวนนักศึกษาอยู่ในประเทศลาวได้พากันลุกขึ้นเฮ็ดประท้วงข้าเจ้าพอเพียงแต่ยกป้ายประท้วงขึ้นเท่านั้นก็ถูกจับไปทรมานจนถึงปัจจุบันนี้1999ถึงปี2013ข้าเจ้ายังถูกทรมานอยู่ในคุก
Some of these students that are still in prison since 1999 have not been heard from since, nor been released.
บางคนจากคณะข้าเจ้าสามารถโดนออกมาลี้ภัยในประเทศสหรัฐจำนวน5 ทาง
Few of the fortunate ones were able to leave Laos and are living overseas under political asylum.
เหตุการณ์ให้เองที่เกิดอยู่ในลาวปัจจุบันนี้ก็คือแม่นเหตุการณ์การฆ่ามนุษย์ฆ่าเด็กน้อยไปประเทศเพื่อนบ้านเป็นหลายแสนคนซึ่งประเทศอื่นนี่เขาก็มีอยู่แต่มันบ่ให้เองคืออยู่ในประเทศลาวก็นับเป็นแสนคนพลเมืองลาวมีเพียงแต่5 ล้าน 6 ล้านคนเท่านั้น
Right now, currently, one of the biggest social problems in Laos is the human trafficking. For a population of total of 6 million, nearly 200,000
หลายแสนคน
and hundreds of thousands are involved in human trafficking, ranging from young girls as young as teenagers being sold to prostitution, and young men being sold into slavery or in neighboring countries.
ทางการสปปลาวประกาศว่าจะพากันแก้ไขแต่มาเบิ่งตัวจริงแล้วมันการพวกที่ถูกไปฆ่าถูกไปนำไปฆ่าอยู่ในประเทศขายตัวอยู่ในประเทศเพื่อนบ้านนั้นแม่น1แม่นข้าเจ้าชีวิตการเป็นอยู่ทุกข์ยากประเทศปกครองบ่ถูกต้อง2ข้าเจ้าถูกต้องตัวไปขาย3มาก็แม่นว่าทางการสปปลาวนี่บ่ตั้งใจทำการปวดการหรือว่าปราบปรามโดยเฉพาะเจ้าหน้าที่ที่ซ่อกงนั้นแม่นเขาซื้อจ้างกันได้สบายทางการสปปลาวบ่ได้เอาไปใช้ในการแก้ไขปัญหา
While the Lao government paid lip service to about enforcing the rules and regulations and preventing human trafficking, there hasn't been any effective means, and the people still suffer.
ซึ่งอยู่ในประเทศไทยมีข่าวออกหลายที่สุดแต่ว่าอยู่ในประเทศในสปปลาวเองพยายามสกัดกั้นบ่ให้คนลาวในประเทศรู้จักปัญหา
If nothing else, it's an open secret in the sense that the regime keeps it away from the people through their news control. However, free news media in the surrounding countries address it accordingly, such as Thailand.
บางคนอีกถูกทรมานกลับคืนมาในประเทศลาวก็ถูกทั้งกู้เอาเงินแล้วยังถูกจับอีกอันนี้แม่นพวกที่ถูกไปขายตัวนี่มีปัญหาหลายที่สุด
Many of these people being trafficked are basically victims not only of the traffickers, but also when they come back, the police, government officials also extract money from them.
นอกจากนั้นแล้วเด็กน้อยลาวยังมีการถูกติดยาบ้าซึ่งว่าเม็ดแอมเฟตามินเป็นเรื่องให้แห่งที่สุดอยู่ในประเทศลาวปัจจุบันเกือบว่าเด็กน้อย3 คนผู้ที่3 คนที่ใดอันเป็นติดยาบ้าแล้วปัจจุบันเหตุผลติดยาบ้าก็ย้อนว่าการผลิตยาบ้านี่อยู่ในประเทศลาวเองอยู่3 เหลี่ยมทองคำผู้ผลิตยาบ้าก็ไม่ผู้ขั้นน้ำสูงสุดในอนุญาตให้กับเจ้าเฮ็ดเขาบ่ตั้งใจป่าแล้วพวกที่ค้ายาบ้าอยู่ในประเทศลาวไม่คนเวียดนามทางนั้นซึ่งว่าตำรวจลาวนี่บ่กล้าจับพวกนี้จึงเป็นเหตุให้ยาบ้าระบาดอยู่ในประเทศลาวหลายที่สุด
One of the big scourges is the drug abuse. It's rampant and it's corrupt because, and it's most of the drug pushers are basically have very strong connections to the regime, and so there's no enforcement. And so, as a consequence, the abundance of drugs only fuel the epidemic with the youths of Laos.
พวกท่านจะเห็นบ่อนผลิตยาบ้าไผ่กูรู้ว่าอยู่3 เหลี่ยมทองคำชายแดนติดจอดกันระหว่างลาวเข้ามาในไทยนี่เป็นบ่อนผลิตยาบ้าที่หาเห็นที่สุดอยู่ในประเทศลาว
The meth factory basically exists in this Golden Triangle, which where Laos, Burma, and Thailand converge. It's right there in the border, so it's sanctioned by the government of regimes.
ซึ่งมาได้พวกเพียงแต่ขยายผลิตอยู่ในประเทศลาวแล้วยังขนไปประเทศเพื่อนบ้านโดยเฉพาะไปประเทศไทยทางเจ้าหน้าที่ไทยก็มีปัญหานะ กับลาวแต่ว่าทางการของลาวบ่เอาใจใส่ปราบปรามแก้ไข
Unfortunately, that's the biggest export for Laos is drugs through the Golden Triangle.
พวกท่านจะเห็นว่าอยู่ในประเทศลาวเองนะมีการใช้ยาฟินยาเสพติดที่แบบเปิดเผยทางการลาวบ่เอาใจใส่พวกท่านจะเห็นว่าคันไปห้านอาหารโดยเฉพาะเขตบางเวียงมันติดซื้อห้านอาหารใส่โอปิอุมเป็นรายการพวกจักน้ำดื่มอาหารการกินพวกท่านจะเห็นที่ว่ามีนักท่องเที่ยวเขาเจ้าไปถ่ายรูปออกมาโอปิอุมเมนู
In Vientiane, with one of the popular resorts in Vientiane, you can go and openly select a menu of cocktails of drugs and opium.
ซึ่งว่าประเทศอื่นที่เขาห้ามปรามที่สุดแต่ว่าประเทศลาวนะปกครองคันว่ามีรัฐบาลมีตำรวจเป็นอย่างบ่แก้ไขปัญหานี้อันนี้เป็นรัฐบาลนี้เป็นรัฐบาลเถื่อนที่ว่าปล่อยให้ประเทศลาวนี้ถือปัญหาหายแหงและเขาบ่แก้ไข
Most countries, the police and the officials would go in and enforce it and eradicate that, but Laos openly support that, and there's no report.
ปัญหาอันต่อไปก็คือการที่ทางรัฐบาลสปป.ลาวนี่ยังปล่อยให้บังคับประชาชนลาวเอาดินดอนประชาชนลาวให้นายทุนต่างชาติโดยเฉพาะให้จีนให้เวียดนามและประเทศอื่นๆที่เขาต้องการดินดอนตอนนี้ใดนี่มันบังคับไล่ประชาชนลาวออกข้าเจ้าบ่อยากและบ่อยากหนีก็ยังบังคับให้ออกจ่ายเงินให้กระจายเล็กน้อยแล้วก็เอาคนโดยเฉพาะคนจีนตัวอย่างสิเข้ามาอยู่ในเขตนั้นคือตัวอย่างที่ห้าแห่งเกิดขึ้นคือเขตสามเหลี่ยมทองคำข้าเจ้าหันได้เอาดินตัวนั้นให้จีนเศร้า99 ปีแล้วเอาจีนมาอยู่110,000 คนมาอยู่ปัจจุบันนี้มาแต่ปีผ่านมาปี2012
Right now, another big issue is land grabs, where the government systematically forced its own populace to move from lands and then sell it, or rather lease it through 99-year leases to Chinese and Vietnamese, robbing the Laotian people of their livelihood.
นอกจากนั้นยังมีเขตอื่นๆที่ก็เป็นเหมือนกันแต่สิ่งที่ห้าแห่งคืออยู่นครหลวงเวียงจันทร์เองเมืองหลวงของเราเขายังเอาเขตบึงท่าหลวงนี้มอบให้จีนและที่กำลังสร้างกันอย่างกระทึกละคนจีนมาจำนวน 55,000 คนมาอยู่นครหลวงเวียงจันทร์แล้วพวกท่านลองวาดภาพว่านครหลวงเวียงจันทร์นั้นเป็นของคนลาวหรือของคนจีนกันแท้
Perhaps the biggest abuse is in Vientiane proper, which is the capital of Laos. They sign over leasing rights to the Chinese right in the center of the capital, giving a special permission to the Chinese to come in and build Chinatown, and at the same time allowing over 5,000 Chinese to permanently settle. 55,000 Chinese to settle in Vientiane proper.
พวกเราเข้าใจว่าอยู่ประเทศอื่นมีChinatownเนาะแต่ว่าอยู่ประเทศลาวChinatownมันก็คืออยู่อเมริกาเพราะว่าอย่างพวกคนจีนมาอยู่ห้านนี้เขามีสิทธิ์เหนือคนลาวเขาสามารถตั้งตำรวจเขาเอาทุงประเทศเขามาได้เขาควบคุมเขาเองคนลาวบ่มีสิทธิ์อย่างไปต่อว่าเขาได้ถ้าทางรัฐบาลสปป.ลาวก็รับใช้เขาทั้งนั้น
While we understand there are Chinatowns throughout the world, even here in DC, however, Chinatown in Laos is different. The Chinatown in Laos is basically its own enclave with its own laws and regulations, where the Laotian people are second-class citizens within their own country.
สรุปแล้วเขตภาคเหนือแม่นจีนมาซื้อเอาดินตอนนั้นโดยการซ่อโกงของผู้นำภาครัฐสปป.ลาวเขตทางภาคกลางภาคใต้แม่นเวียดนามหมายความว่าประเทศลาวนี่ยังถือแบ่งให้ต่างชาตินี่มากินมาซื้อเอาดินนั้นเป็นเวลายาวนานคนลาวสิบ่มีบ่อนอยู่ประชาชนบ่มีบ่อนหาอยู่ทำหากิน
The Laotian government systematically allowed foreigners, principally the Chinese and Vietnamese. In the north, the Chinese basically sign out 99-year leases with renewal option in perpetuity and settle the land with their settlers and have their own laws. In the southern part of the country, the Vietnamese comes in and set their own state or kingdom, whatever you want to call it, feudal, and then they have their own laws and rights with Laotian being subservient to.
เหตุการณ์อันนี้บ่แม่นเรื่องว่าน้อยๆเดี๋ยวนี้ที่เกิดอยู่ทุกบ้านทุกเมืองทุกเขตอยู่ในลาวภาครัฐนี้ประกาศว่านโยบายพัฒนาเศรษฐกิจพิเศษในตัวจริงแล้วเป็นการบังคับเอาดินประชาชนนี้ไปให้นายทุนต่างชาติแล้วทางการสปป.ลาวอาศัยด้วยการซ่อโกงเซ็นโครงการใดได้เงินก้อนโตเป็นล้านดอลลาร์หลายล้านดอลลาร์มาเข้าถุงส่วนตัวเองหรือพรรคพวกตัวเองอันนี้เป็นเหตุผลที่มีปัญหาหนักที่สุดในประเทศลาวปัจจุบัน
This land grab is being done under the guise of communist state sanction, guise of the new way of developing the country. However, the money that actually gets handed either overtly or covertly does not benefit the people, but it only benefits the governing elite through their own bank accounts.
ไอ้แหงเป็นตึมคือการทำลายธรรมชาติการสร้างเขื่อนอย่างบุมีขอบเขตเป็นร้อยเขื่อนนะประเทศลาวน้อยๆแผ่นดินนะว่าแต่มีน้ำที่บอนใดไหลแล้วเป็นสร้างเขื่อนคุณโลดบ่คิดไล่ว่าผลได้ผลเสียแล้วอยู่แม่น้ำของเองแม่น้ำที่ว่าผู้ใดก็รู้ว่ามีความสำคัญเขาสร้างเขื่อนมีแผนทั้งหมด11เขื่อนที่สร้างและเขาสร้างอยู่เดือนนี้มันเขื่อนสัญญาบุรีทั่วโลกไผ่ก็ต่อว่าประเทศเพื่อนบ้านไผ่ก็ต่อว่าพวกนั้นจะเห็นรูปประชาชนไทยประชาชนเขมรประท้วงอยู่ทุกมือปานนั้นรัฐบาลสปปลาวยังพากันสร้างต่อไปแบบดื้อด้านของฝั่งไทย
Amongst their grand scheme of developed Laos is the construction of various dams. For a country the size of the UK, anywhere where there's rivers and streams, they plan to build dams. Most notably in the Mekong River itself, which transcends multi-states. They're planning on building up to 11 dams, which have dramatic repercussions downstream to Cambodia and Vietnam proper.
ในนั้นก็ยังมีการตัดไม้ทำลายป่าตัดไม้มีปัญหาหนักคือว่าเม่นกองทัพเวียดนามเป็นผู้คุมตัดไม้แต่ลาวไปขายที่เวียดนามผลิตใส่ซื้อเวียดนามไปขายในทั่วโลกลาวทั้งเสียไม้ทั้งบ่มีซื้อทั้งถึงสภาพเป็นล้อมป่าปามเวียดนามคุมเอาไปอันนี้เป็นปัญหาใหญ่ที่สุดในลาว
One of the biggest problems is basically illegal logging. While Vietnam itself says that they cannot legally log their own log, they come to Laos, cut the forest down, transport it over to Vietnam, put a made in Vietnam stamp over and sell it overseas. However, Laos does not benefit from it at all.
พวกสังกัดอยู่ในขั้นนำภาครัฐปัจจุบันอดบรนผู้ใดก็ออกมาประกาศกล่าวถึงความผิดพลาดของภาครัฐโดยเฉพาะเป็นดร.คำเผยปันมาเลยทองได้วิพากษ์วิจารณ์ว่าการปกครองในลาวเผด็จการคอมมิวนิสต์นี้สมควรจะเปลี่ยนไปเป็นประชาธิปไตยแล้วพวกมันบ่เหมาะสมในประเทศลาว
Most notable, while there aren't any dissensions, there's been a notable member of Parliament, Dr. Kamkui. He came out and spoke against systematic rule of the Communist Party. And the Communist Party has no right to monopolize power. However, he has a sense to.
ดร.คำเผยเป็นผู้แทนสภาแห่งชาติและเป็นเลขาธิการประจำพรรคสปปลาวหลังจากเราออกเขมรนี้เขาก็อันปัดเราออกจากหน้าที่ของเราเมื่อนี้เหลือแต่เป็นผู้แทนสภาปัจจุบันปากก็ได้ไอ้ก็ได้
Well, prior to him speaking out, he was a prominent member of Parliament and at the same time the Communist Party. However, since he came out publicly criticized the party, he has been since demarginalized.
อันสภาพปัจจุบันผู้ใดก็รู้พวกท่านได้ฟังการ Amnesty โดยรายงานเรื่องท่านสมบัติสมพรไปก็รู้ว่าท่านสมบัติสมพรนี่หายสาบสูญพวกเราในนามขบวนลาวเพื่อประชาธิปไตยยั่งยืนว่าท่านสมบัติสมพรนี่หายสาบสูญเป็นทางการสปปลาวเป็นผู้วางแผนที่ให้เราหายสาบสูญเหตุผลก็ย้อนว่าลาวนี่เป็นผู้นำพาอยู่ในกองประชุมมวลชนอาเซมอยู่ในลาวนั้นทางการสปปลาวอยากทำลายเราเพื่อตัดบ่ให้เราเป็นผู้นำพาให้ประชาชนลาวนี่ต่อว่าต่อขานอย่างไรเขาจึงเห็นให้เราหายสาบสูญแล้วรายงานของพวกเขาเข้าใจว่าเขาสงสัยว่าเขาเอาเราไปประหารชีวิตแล้ว
The Lao government systematically oppose any opposition, even those that are not, the well-intent persons such as Sombat Sompon, as merely a civil society leader. However, they abducted him under closed-circuit TV with video feed. However, he has since not been heard from.
ฉะนั้นพวกเราทั้งทั่วโลกมาประชุมกันอยู่ที่วอชิงตันดีซีนี้เป็นจุดประสงค์อยากห้องขอทางองค์การสากลช่วยพวกเราช่วยแก้ไขปัญหาของเราทั้งหมดที่มีนักหนาที่นี่คันพวกท่านช่วยเหลือพวกเราประเทศเราพวกเราจะเสียพวกเราจะมีชื่อแต่ว่าเป็นเราแต่ความจริงแล้วก็ไม่ของคนเราจะบ่มีดินอยู่จะบ่มีวิญญาณจะแตกสรุปผู้ไปไปอยู่นอกประเทศพวกเราจะเสียในบนนั้นฉะนั้นจึงขอถามที่พวกคนที่มาห่วงมีว่าพวกคนจะช่วยเหลือพวกเราด้านใดๆที่จะเป็นไปได้อยากให้ประเทศเราเปลี่ยนแปลงไปสู่ประชาธิปไตยมีการเลือกตั้งเสรีมีหลายพรรคการเมืองมีสากลเป็นกรรมการกลางให้เรามีเอกราชให้เวียดนามยุติการปกครองเราให้จีนยุติการมาเอาดินดอนตอนหญ้าของเราว่าให้ต่างชาติมาเอาดินเรานี่เป็นของเขาเจ้าแบบง่ายๆพวกเราบ่ได้มีอย่างคัดข้องกับชาวต่างประเทศพวกเรานี่อยากเป็นเพื่อนมิตรกับประเทศเพื่อนบ้านโดยที่ว่าอยู่นำกันแบบสันติวิธีนับถืออธิปไตยซึ่งกันและกัน
As a result of all the listed problems, we're here gathered in Washington D.C. to talk about these problems. Not only talk about it so much, but coordinate with other organizations and individuals to help study the issue and then help us to come up with some sort of resolution, because what we fear the most is that Laos will be a country only, in name only, because its own folks are being systematically marginalized, and the resources of the country are basically being plundered for the benefit of the few. And so we want to work closely with other NGOs and organizations and governments to see if we can systematically change Laos through peaceful means.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bounthone. I just have a note to the meeting. I think we have imposed enough on Dr. Cooper's time, and I'm sure he brought so many interesting things yesterday, so many ideas, and we still have questions. In the interest of not trying to impose on him anymore at this time, and also because of the limited time of that we have today at hand, I'd like to go straight and if it's all right, to welcome Mr. Micheal Beer of Nonviolence International. And this is for us a very exciting new event, Nonviolence International, and which is very compatible to what we're trying to do here. We're trying to use nonviolence to fight violence. And as you all know, I think just to set the tone, I think from what Dr. Bounthone has said, I think just recap 3 points. The most immediate issue for us, most critical, is the enforced disappearance, highlighted by the disappearance of Mrs. Sun. We all know about that. And the second most serious concern for us is the land grab. And it has the potential of becoming very explosive in Laos, with the people who take just so much. And we're here to prevent violence, to prevent conflict. And the third one is the way the party is trying to develop the country through big mega projects like electric dams and large-scale exploitation of natural resources. This is, for us, not compatible to sustainable development. So with those 3 issues, I'd like to say a word of welcome to Mr. Beer, Micheal Beer, who's given us the time out of his busy schedule today. So please welcome Dr. Beer.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here today. I know that in this room there are hundreds of years of concern and passion and sacrifice written in your faces for your people in Laos. And I cannot come here and give you much advice about Laos. I have not been to Laos. I have been to Thailand many, many times because I worked for many, many years training Burmese resistance movements figures in the 1990s and early 2000s to help the Burmese resistance movements and the various ethnic minorities of Burma. And so I do have some familiarity with the region and have some understanding of what your people are going through. But again, I'm not in any way an expert and will not be trying to give you advice specifically about Laos. My group works with resistance movements all over the world, trying to help resistance movements against dictators, and also we try to help social movements, whether it's the women's movement or environmental movements or other kinds of movements, also achieve their goals through nonviolent struggle. Clearly, nonviolent struggle is your best option. You don't really have an armed resistance movement that's really possible in Laos that can likely succeed. And you don't have good access in your country to either a legal system or elections that can bring change to your country. And so your primary way forward is to use nonviolent struggle, which is a big grab bag of everything else that's not formalized by the government, and to try to organize the people in a way that you can bring change to your country. The good news is that there are many examples from different countries of success and examples of defeating communist dictatorships as well. And you should try to study the various successes and try to see which strategies and approaches can be helpful in your situation. Of course, Laos is unique. Every country is unique. And clearly, this is not easy. Otherwise, you would have succeeded a long time ago. Does somebody need to translate for me, or can I just speak in English? So, looking at your struggle, I see there are two major components. You have people power inside the country, and you have people power outside the country. These are your two main, if you want to think in terms of a big strategy, you have two major forces that you have to organize. And of course, I will borrow from a colleague of mine who says there are three important principles that you need to organize around. These things you kind of know already, but I just remind you of their importance. One is unity. And I think this conference here is an example of the unity that you are trying to build in the Lao resistance movement, both inside and outside. And you do have, we can always do better. I'm sure that there are many disagreements, and that's fine. And we don't always have to like each other, and sometimes we don't like each other, but we still have to get along for the sake of the country and the future of your children and grandchildren. So unity is something we always say, and it's trite, it's a cliche, but of course it's very important, and we must constantly work at it. Unity means also bringing all the players to the table that you possibly can. One of the great things about nonviolent struggle is that it makes use of not just the young men, who are usually what we think of as fighters in a society, but nonviolent struggle can include everybody. And that, for example, means that half your population in Laos and outside are women and female. And I'm not seeing many women or females here today, but reminding you all that you already know this, that empowering women in Laos is going to be part of the success of bringing democracy and freedom to your country. And so the women's movement is very closely tied to many successful nonviolent struggles. And I won't go into all the other unity issues, but you're well aware of them, I'm sure. Every movement has disagreements. This is normal. Don't think that you are more splintered or scattered or have more infighting than any other community. Every resistance movement has lots of infighting, has political disagreements, has personality disagreements, and power disagreements. We have somebody from Vietnam here. I'm sure she can explain that this is the same thing for the Vietnam resistance movements. And you can sometimes think of your division as bad, but try to look at the positive side, that you have many different people with different perspectives and different strengths that can come together. And if you can build that unity and try to work together, your success, of course, can be greatly improved. one of the wonderful things around unity in recent years is the internet and modern communication. Before, 15, 20 years ago, I'm sure many of you were active then also, there was a much bigger difference between people inside and people outside. And sometimes outsiders caused a lot of problems because the people outside think they are the next leader of the country and they're going to come and save the country. And the people inside are like, who are you? We're the ones who are suffering. We don't want to hear your radical views. And so the division between inside and outside used to be greater in most places in the world. And outsiders were not always so sensitive to their power and privilege. And one of the great things in many parts of the world is that because of modern communication, many of you can pick up a telephone probably and call instantly inside. And people inside can get news from around the world. There is a breakdown in this outside-inside division. Now it's still there, and you need to be sensitive to it. And your role in almost all cases is to try to be a supportive leader and not try to be the leaders, but try to always, as best as you can, to support leadership to evolve inside, wherever it may be, even if it's not exactly your political views here. But usually outsiders cannot provide the political leadership in most countries that's required. And no matter how brilliant you are, or how, what your family ties are, or how good a Buddhist, Christian, or whatever you might be, the leadership generally has to come from inside. And so there are some positive developments in recent years on inside versus outside, and hopefully you can build unity between the two. It's a constant struggle, but I wish you the best of luck. Besides unity, a second great area to remind yourselves about is discipline. Discipline in nonviolent struggle is quite helpful. Obviously, it only takes a small number of people to use weapons or bombs and contaminate your movement, and then the government can say, oh, look, they're all terrorists, and I'm sure they've used this before, and they'll try to use it again. And they'll use it even if you're as good as Buddha or Jesus or Gandhi, they'll still call you terrorist, but the people will know that you're not terrorist. And discipline is important, but it's not just discipline around violence, it's also discipline around your political goals and your staying on message. I know that a lot of people have now learned the importance of the discipline of messaging. Everybody from the children all the way up, we're on the same message. Don't get distracted, by the violence of the government to get off your message. And so discipline of message and conduct is very important. And the third area is that's very important for you to remember is planning. Planning is just very important. The idea that you're going to have some sort of spontaneous victory with people just erupting in the streets and taking over is unlikely. Planning, as many of you know, and you're older, I generally have to spend more time talking about planning with younger people, but planning is very, very important. Think of yourselves as a nonviolent army, and the importance of coordinating all the various forces around the world and within inside, and the sequencing of events that you need. You first focus on certain kinds of messaging and goals before you move to the next goals, and it's very important for you to plan and sequence as best you can. That's hard to do, planning, when you don't have a lot of resources. When you have unity problems and discipline problems, it's very hard to do planning. Generally, planning in many cases does not have to be done secretly. One of the challenges I saw in Burma, and you probably have in Laos as well, is there is this very strong World War II and then communist approach to organizing that involved underground cells. The whole idea of underground organizing, secret organizing. And this can work well if you have a huge outside funder, a country that supports your underground movement, because underground cells are very expensive to run and require lots of resources to manage. But underground movements rarely win unless there's a huge backer from outside. And yes, it's tough in societies like yours where people raise their head, they get their head cut off. It's hard to go above ground, as in the case with Sombath. But if you look at Gandhi, if you look at many of the Eastern European struggles, the more you can get above ground in your thinking and get away from this kind of communist World War II underground cells, secret this, secret that, probably the better chance you have of succeeding. The problem with underground cells are many, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. You can get a group organized in a little location, but they cannot mobilize a lot of people because they're secret and the people don't know about them and the people don't trust them. And also the government, the dictators of the governments are very repressive and they like to keep the cells isolated from each other so that cells cannot do coordinated planning well. And so you do have, oh yeah, you have this wonderful group that's done this work for many, many years, but they stay a small group. And if you're going to build a people power movement, you have to push for above ground organizing. Now that is not easy, of course, and that means you will have people like Sombath and others who will be arrested. You will have people who will be disappeared. It comes at a cost. But it also makes you think in ways that you can organize above ground in Laos that may not immediately feel threatening to the regime. For example, in Eastern Europe, one of the movements before the fall of the communist governments was the environmental movements, because the environmental movement had a lot of supporters within the communist bureaucracy. And so it wasn't seen as a direct attack on the government. And so there may be value in you for looking at movements, social movements, and movements that will improve your country, whether it's a dictator or not. You need an environmental movement, even if you have democracy tomorrow in Laos. You need an environmental movement. And so organizing above ground in environmental movements, I saw in here in the State Department report, and many people think, oh, isn't that interesting? You know, it talks about disability movement. Well, disability movement in this country was remarkably successful in getting significant changes in this society. And you also have the added advantage in Laos of trying to organize military veterans who fought for the communists, who fought for the current regime, but who are wounded and who are disabled and who are not treated well or not given good rights. There may be opportunities for you to do more organizing among the disabled in Laos. And of course, we know that disabled are disproportionately also people who are older. And so increasingly in Laos, you're getting larger and larger groups of older people. So it's a great way to organize older people and cut across kind of the traditional ways of organizing. I hope I'm not doing too long. I'm trying to, I don't know Laos, but I'm trying to give these suggestions. So there may be other ways to organize. I'm also a big fan of organizing amidst the various business communities. Business communities aren't necessarily controlled by the government. Now, I know you have a mafia government, similar to the Burma government, kind of a mafia government where they control a lot of the big business and their friends and family are all, you know, I'm guessing it's similar. But there are also perhaps 1 million people in the country who run their own little small shops and farmers and small businesses. And you can try to organize them in their own self-interest, not immediately to be against the government, but to help them organize for their own self-interest. Because every time one of the small businesses tries to compete against one of the mafia-connected businesses with the government, they lose and they suffer. It's not an equal playing field. And so I'm sure you can get lots of support from various businesses in your country to organize for their own self-interest against the corrupt government that you undoubtedly have. Another great way to push for freedom of speech this goes for Vietnam, these things I'm saying too, in many of these countries is to push for freedom of speech and information for business community. If you remember 10 years ago in China when they had the SARS sickness, the government kept it secret. And the Chinese businessmen lost billions and billions of dollars because many of them were in the export industries and not knowing what's going on. And all of the international investors and business people were able to move quickly when they learned about SARS, but all of the domestic Chinese business people were hammered because the government wasn't giving them accurate information, and then they couldn't react, and they didn't know what was going on, and I don't know the details, but they put so much, the Chinese government realized that they suffered economically very badly because they kept the information from their own business people. You know, and this is an epidemic. You know, this wasn't anything political. This is an epidemic. So you can have people in Laos. The business people in Laos should be the foremost fighters for freedom of information. Because if you want to be able to compete with the Thai and with the Chinese and with the Burmese and with your neighboring countries, your business people have to get the information just as fast as all the other information. And that means good information, bad information, rumors, everything. Your business people cannot compete if you don't have access to immediate information.
Yep.
And so one of the best ways to push for freedom of information and speech in your country is to get the business community to say, we have to be able to get information and share information, including rumors, and express all these contrary opinions and all that. So I'm trying to give you ways that you can help empower the people in your country that isn't necessarily focused on a direct attack on the regime, but is focused on meeting the needs of people in society. I'll mention one more. I know I have some limited time. I'm a big fan of consumer movements. One of the biggest opposition movements in Southeast Asia was the Penang Consumer Association, Malaysia. It was the leading opposition organization in the 1970s and 80s in Malaysia, the Penang Consumer Association. Everybody in Laos is a consumer. I'm sure there's a lot of corruption, and the government does not protect the consumers against the bad Chinese medicine that's being sold on the streets, or the all kinds of things that are bad for children or are environmentally bad, or there are just many, many dimensions of consumer education that you can do, and advocacy. You can try to sue in the court system. I'm sure your court system is bad, but you still should try to make use of it. Maybe you can get some lawsuits in your courts there that can get through. You can also, the whole idea of consumer buying cooperatives, maybe the people in one village can all buy rice together and cut out the corrupt government middleman or middlewoman who's the selling rice at a high price, and maybe collectively the consumers can buy in a whole village or town together rice at a cheaper price or other products, so that there are ways that you can organize consumers not just to boycott, but to buy together and to work together And this can be effective in trying to fight off some of your neighbors who are trying to take over your country. So you're basically empowering people with their money, is consumer boycott, empowering, they can vote with their money. And that's a whole area that probably you could do more in and learn from some of your, Malaysia or other consumer associations in the region that have been very effective politically and in organizing and helping people with their lives. I know I don't have much time. I think I will stop there and take questions. I'm happy to talk to many of you at greater length if you're interested into trying to develop some of what I've said further. I'm sorry I don't have much time and I don't know much about Laos. But change is coming to Laos. You all know this. It's coming, and a change for the better. But you are fighting against time, and there is a sense of urgency. China and your neighbors, all of your neighbors will eat you up very gladly, and you need to save Laos before it's eaten up by others. So I'll stop there. I hope this has been helpful for you, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Beer. And you exceeded our expectation, way exceeded our expectation. I was very excited, and not only at first that you came here, but also a lot of your pointers are first for us. And I'd like just to put this in before I put the questions. Well, what intrigued me was the use of terminology. You say resistance, you say political opposition. To me, that kind of paled. And I'd like to find out from you what sort of legal implications, international, in terms of perception. I like to use the word resistance rather than opposition. It means proactive, it means to do things. So I'd like to put that question to you. And before I shut up, I'd like to find out if you would be kind enough to let us get in touch with you and follow up on a lot of these valuable, tricks of the trade, when they call them that. And then, of course, we'll get together and then we'll put, we all from different parts of the world who can coordinate and get in touch with you and Dr. Cooper. That's all right. Sure. It would be very helpful for us.
Sure. Well, I can answer very briefly. I heard a story, I've heard a few stories around the use of the word resistance and defense that can be helpful, at least in an English context. I don't know Laos. You'll have to decide when to use political opposition and when to use resistance. I'm sure there are probably good times to use either one. But more specifically, there was a story about a big chemical corporation that went into West Virginia and opened up right next to an elementary school, and the environmental movement sent in some activists to organize, and the activists said, down with the big corporations, and we need to change this situation, and it didn't work. So they said, what was wrong? They sent in another set of organizers later, and they said to the community, you know what? We're here to defend your town against the big corporation that's coming to your town, and yeah, it's providing jobs, but it's going to be destroying your town. We're here to protect your way of life. And even though the environmentalists were wanting to change the situation to get the corporation out, they came in with very much of, we are here to defend you, defend your way of life. And this is resistance, has this same kind of idea. People don't want to change very much. We know people, they say it, but we're creatures of habit. People don't like to change much. And so if you try to go into a community and say, we want revolution and we want political change, they're like, yeah, but in reality, people in many cases don't want to change very much. And so it's very helpful to go in to a community and say, look, we're here, particularly as outsiders. This is very important for you as those of you outside the country to say, we know we're here to protect the traditional Lao way of life and traditional economy, and we're here to help you resist the mafia from China and Vietnam and your own countrymen and women, and we're here to protect you from these horrible changes. So social change and this defense language is tricky to use. You have to know when to use it, but the use of defense and resistance can be very, very helpful in certain communities at certain times. So that's the best as I can do. Did you have a second point, or you just wanted to?
Anybody else have questions? Please be quick and brief. Anybody? John? Okay, Mr. Sitikon.
Yes,
Please make it brief.
yes, my name is Sitikon. I'm from Australia. Would like to ask you that is there any suggestion that we can find a fund is available to support our movement organization?
Right. This is a big problem for most expatriate communities, and I know you're not as wealthy as many. And it's even a problem for wealthy expatriate communities. I work a lot with Iranians, and Iranians are just incredibly wealthy around the world, and there are a lot of them, and they still can't raise very much money for their resistance or the political opposition. One of the ideas that I've been promoting, and nobody has really done it yet, is how to raise money from your own community, which I know is tough. And what I propose that you may want to consider is some sort of campaign that is in which you ask people to pledge a percentage of their income, their annual income, to Laos. And the idea would be that you would ask everybody everybody you meet, and that to publicly pledge, I will pledge 3% of my income to Laos. You don't have to say who you're giving the money to. You could be giving it to your family in Laos for all you care. But the idea is you want to promote the idea that everybody publicly has a responsibility to give a percentage of their money and to publicly say how much it is. People will not see who you give the money to or how much, but if you can everybody you get a kind of community idea going, like, okay, we're expatriates, but we all have a tax to pay. We all have a tax to pay for Laos. If you want all of your tax money to go to your family and be selfish, fine. But some of us will try to also give some of our money to political opposition and to organizing and education efforts to change the situation, and not just to benefit our own families. But if all you can do is send the money back to your mother and cousins, okay, that's okay, but we'll have a conversation to try to get you to do this more. So if you could have a 1+ campaign, a 1% + campaign in the Lao community worldwide, in which you really asked everybody to pledge 1% or more of their annual income, and they can choose what it is. I don't know, this is offering an opportunity. You're not going to get money from Americans, Armenians, South Africa. You're not going to get money. There's not going to be some, wonderful sugar daddy or mommy in the sky that's going to give you the money. And if they do, they'll have strings attached. It'll be some big corporation that wants to get to a gold mine in, Laos, and so you're stuck with, that. So big money has a price attached to it. I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you very much. You have time for just a note, there's no more gold mine in Laos. all gone. Anybody else? Brief question? Yes, since everybody else is...
My name is Alan Sananikon, and well, actually, I didn't want to be negative, but from my experience, working with various groups, it seems like whatever you have talked about, all those suggestions in here, seems to be, a failure so far. Is that because of the timing? Is that because of the bad communication? I don't know. But, for example, there's people that are trying to raise cattle, organize, some kind of better living. And when it succeeds, then the government take over. Or at least one of those high-ranking government officials would take over. They would say, no, if you want to continue doing that, you better get me under, as participation and give me a certain interest. If not, get out of here as fast as you can.
If I may,
We'll take over.
would you
Something
pose,
like that.
Would you pose the
So,
question, please?
I don't know what else we can do.
I see. Right. Well, I don't know what else you can do either. It's not my country. And I'm not guaranteeing you success. Violent struggle or nonviolent struggle, there's no guarantee that you're going to win. You do have a choice about whether you try or not. And clearly you're here because you're trying. I don't think anybody's going to come up with any magical answers for you. Oh, wow, this is the, some new way. The great thing about nonviolent struggle is that sometimes seeds are planted 20 years ago when you did do some sort of organizing among the people, and the government did take it over, but the people are still resentful and they've learned some things. And so attempting to empower your people, even if it doesn't succeed in getting the regime change you want, trying to empower your people, I just think is, you try to do it whether you end up being as successful as you would like. You do have one really big problem that I need to remind you of that you already know, which is that internationally, you've got Vietnam and China, and they're tough. And you need to try to figure out a way, and this is where the international group comes in, you need to try to figure out a way to find allies in China and find allies in Vietnam who can help challenge at least some of the policies of those governments. Finding allies is tough in Vietnam and China. It's going to be tough, but it can be done. I really believe it can be done. And this is one of your jobs to take on one of these tougher issues. How can you find allies in China and Vietnam, whether they're part of the opposition movements or whether they're somehow in the bureaucracies of the communists? We don't know. And maybe you can find these through the environmental route, or you can find them through the women route or religious route. I don't know. But you need to find allies in these neighboring countries that will begin to speak up in their own countries. And traditionally, I bet you haven't really thought, you said, oh, there's a monolithic Chinese Communist Party and monolithic Communist Party in Vietnam, and there's nothing we can do. Public opinion in those countries matter. You should not forget the public opinion increasingly in those countries, because change is coming there too. Don't forget public opinion and the potential to get allies in those countries. So I hope that's helpful.
I was going to say, the one reason that I did invite Micheal today is we were talking to him about the protests you were doing over the weekend. And another thing was the question yesterday about people power. And, I know in the discussion, the reason I said I didn't need to talk today is because we covered a lot of things for 2 hours. We talked a little bit about Arab Spring, and I said we should plan an Asia Summer in 2014. But I know Micheal Beer knows about the preparation phase and all the planning, and most people do think Arab Spring just happened. But they've been doing a lot of work in a lot of places beforehand, so I thought he'd be one of the best people to be able to share those levels of preparation and know house seeds have been planted a lot longer before. And he's also brutally honest where he won't give you the answers a lot of the times because it'll be that way, but he has a lot of information on those answers.
I'm happy to do that, but I know you're short on time, so I'm also available afterwards. This is my job. I'm here to help people at length. So I'm happy to stop now, or whatever you would like.
In the interest of time, if you're available, I mean, how can we communicate with you? Or is there a website we can just
Yeah, I've given my business card to a few of them. Joshua knows it, and I'm happy to communicate with any of you. My office is a few minutes from here, and we work with resistance movements around the world for 25 years. And we're not going to give you the answer. You're going to have to come up with the answers yourselves, but we can try to get you in touch with other folks that have done similar. If you want to do consumer work, you want to do disability work, you want to do getting allies in China, we can try to hook you up with people who can get you in the right direction.
Anybody else? Just one more. Anybody else? Okay. Then I'm given the opportunity to open my mouth again. Keep talking about language. I think language is a very strong weapon. I learned from you today, particularly. I never thought about it. I knew all these words, but I didn't know what they mean. Words like resistance. The second word I learned yesterday, people power. Today I learned the word empowerment. And just like you say that before we used to say words like inspired, encouraged, but I think what empowered by Dr. Cooper, making it possible for you to come and give us this idea that, these words represent the idea that represent this. We have to try it, of course, and they're not going to work with themselves. It's a long process. It takes years of planting the seed. We can't just say that, we didn't try it, we tried it, and we not succeeded. No, try again, try some other thing else. Or the plan B. In the same line, but not straying away from what you told us. You showed us the roadmap. It doesn't work, the short run. Go to the medium run, plan B, and so on. And appreciate that very much. And I think if I can go back and maybe changing the way we use words to call ourselves resistance. We were afraid that we used that word before. Kind of connotation of the wartime resistance, underground stuff. And now he says, be bold, go above ground, be smart. This is the way I read it. This is a very invaluable lesson for us. And we're going to go back and get together. I think you talk about unity is very important. Unity doesn't mean agreeing on everything. Right? And in fact, the more different ideas they have, better, as long as we agree on one common approach, one common goal. We have a particular problem in Laos, and we all agree on what needs to be done. There's no competition between the outside and the inside. I can do it better than you. No, it's the opposite. You say you do it first, okay? Because you're there with the United Nations, with world powers. And we say no. The inside people have to start.
Right.
And we can.
This is a big problem. You'll go to every dictatorship, every situation in the world. The people are always like, well, we can't do anything because we've got a dictator, and so we want the United Nations to come to save us. We want the United States to come to save us. We want some outside group to come and say, this is a normal psychological thing, nobody wants to stick up their head and get smacked, and people are feeling, living with this huge dictatorship, that seems huge to them. We know they're a bunch of corrupt and they're fighting and they're really pretty incompetent, but they've just been on top of you for so long that people are always hoping that some outsider is going to come and save them. and they're just waiting and will look at the watch, and a year goes by, 10 years go by. There is not going to be an outsider. The United States is not going to invade Laos, and the United Nations is not going to come. And so this is a common problem that people inside have. They're like, and yes, you try to do everything you can out here, but you cannot bring them, and you cannot delude yourself as outsiders to think that you can bring them freedom from outsiders. You can't find an example around the world where this has really happened. So you just have to disabuse them. Say, there is nobody going to come and save you, including the external opposition. We're not going to come and save you. We can help you, but we can't save you. And it's a tough message, to say, but you can look around the world. There is no example, and you can point to where that's happened. Yeah.
Do you have a branch in any other state besides?
We do have a Thailand office. We do have
United States, maybe.
No, not United States. No.
It's too cold for them to come to Minnesota.
You're up in Minnesota. Minnesota. Yes.
I am Kat from Australia. Could you suggest any mechanism to persuade big power not to give aid to Laos, to Laos government, to the communist government who corrupt, who violate the human rights? Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, it's true.
It's true, of course.
Yeah,
it's a big
true.
problem, and this is your main work.
Yeah.
Is to try to find allies. And you're speaking specific. Which country specifically are you most worried about?
Australia, American, UN, France, Germany.
Very tough.
Many Asian countries.
It's very tough, and you have to try to find allies. There are examples of worldwide boycotts that have been somewhat successful. The Burma resistance movement is the most recent and quite a good example of where you had both. There were actually two boycotts, and people don't remember this. There was the citizen boycott around the world that did not buy teak and rubies and any products from Burma, and didn't send any tourists to Burma. That was the citizen boycott. Had nothing to do with the diplomats or the governments or anything like that. That had to do with citizen boycott, and they worked on college campuses around the world, and they worked in communities around the world, and really quite successful. And then these communities also lobbied their governments to implement, particularly the West, not so much ASEAN, but the West and Japan, lobbied these governments to also do governmental sanctions. And so the Burma movement would be the best movement to look to because they had the most success. They did not have 100% success because we know that China and ASEAN still continue to support Burma military mafia that ruled the country. But the West and Japan was successful. And the citizens, the diplomatic boycotts have mostly come out. And so there is a lot of money going into Burma now. But you still have some citizen boycott movements still active and important. So a combination of organizing at citizen level and diplomatic. It's very tough to do. It's very, very tough. And you are so much smaller than Burma in terms of population. Very tough. But if you would like, there is the Free Burma movement here in Washington. They've had an office here for 10 years. And they still have 2 staff people here, and you can talk to them about what they're doing now and what they've done over the last 10 years. So that would be an example of a movement to look to for learning. Was it the Free Burma Campaign, or was it Free Burma Campaign? FreeBurmaCampaign.org, and their staff people. Not anymore. Which?
Burmese.
Burmese.
Blow hunting?
I think this is different. That's
I'm sorry.
Bolatin?
Yeah, Bolatin.
Bolatin, yeah, that's,
Burma Fund.
that was the political opposition leadership. I'm talking about the grassroots groups here that only half Burmese and half US people who organize the citizens and do the lobbying at the grassroots level. Free Burma campaign.
Yeah, we have a similar one in Germany. It's a Burma project. We have a very good relationship to them. Yeah, they collect money in Germany, and they have some relations to the German politicals, to the German officials, and they make a small, very small development aid project up to $10,000, not more, because up to from $10,000 and more, it will be controlled by this dictatorial mafia. Under 10,000, nobody has any interest, and so they can walk free in this country. It's very interesting what they do.
I just thought of something else, which is that the anti-corruption movements around the world are very successful ways of organizing. It isn't necessarily regime change organizing, but corruption, I'm sure, is a big problem. And anti-corruption campaigning is important. And a friend of mine is putting out a new book on people power movements, bottom-up movements against corruption all over the world. Successful bottom-up movements against corruption around the world. So this is an area where you can also organize people and get victories for the people right away, you know, or at least in the near term. I hope that's helpful.
Well, I guess we, unfortunately, we have to close this invaluable session. And I'm glad, though, that you have, given us the opportunity to meet with you again.
Don't thank me. Just go out there and change the situation.
Particularly, Dr. Kumar for empowering us. And I'd like to mention another first. Today we have someone from the law school, and this is the first, and Amina Abdul Fields. This is really empowering us. We need young people who are concerned like this, and that's why we have Bami, Bunlearn, and now that you joined us, hopefully we talk about allies. Let's start from here, all right? And the people in this room here, and that goes to the rest of us too. Unity, unity and discipline, and planning. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.